Okay, welcome. I'm Fred. I'm in the shed, and this is part 2 of the Olympus Trip 35 video. And in this part of the video, I discuss how about to actually going out and buying one of these cameras today, and how to make sure you actually get a good one, or you don't get one that needs an instant service. Right, Olympus Trip 35, very robust camera. A couple of things to look out for on these cameras. Firstly, it's a good idea to sort of judge the age of the camera that you're looking at, and quite fortunately, if you look at these two cameras, this is an earlier camera and this is a later camera, and you'll notice that the shutter releases are different. On the earlier camera, up to 1978, you had a full metal shutter release, and then after 1978 you had a black plastic shutter release. So there, that straight away, that gives you an indication. If you are lucky, such as this earlier one, you might have a factory pass sticker. And as you can see, this one here, I don't know if you can make that out, but this indicates this was actually produced in 1975. Okay, so we'll assume that you haven't got the little gold sticker on the camera. So how do you tell how old the camera is? Well, it's quite easy actually, because if you'll notice that each camera has a serial number stamped onto the top of the top plate there. And just as a guide, they started the numbers at 100,000. A typical manufacturer employee not to start at 0, so they start at 100,000. They hit the 1 million around 1972, 1973. By 1979, 1980, they was up to about sort of 4 million. And then a camera that's sort of 5 million onwards, that's sort of 1981 to 1984. As I say, Olympus claim 10 million units, but if you read others on the internet, they sort of think it topped out at probably about 5.5 million, 6 million at the most. So, you know, by sort of that gives you an idea of what you're looking at. Okay, so moving on to the camera. You know, quite a solid construction. This camera has got evidence here of a very slight drop, but this camera is fully functional. Right, if you actually get a chance to get hold of one of these, if you're buying from a camera fair, something like that, then a very simple test is to place the camera in automatic mode, which is that little red A there, and then wind the camera on, and then if you're lucky enough to have a lens cap, place the lens cap over the front of the lens, or if not, place your hand over the front of the lens. Make sure that you cover the selenium cell and press the shutter release. And what should happen is the actual camera shouldn't fire. You'll feel it go about halfway down and it will lock. And what will happen, I don't know if you quite make it out, but in the viewfinder there, if I hold that up close to the camera, there we go, you'll just see that little red Perspex flag fly up into the viewfinder, and that's saying that the camera has recorded that there's not enough light to take the correct exposure, and what it's saying is that you need to turn on to these manual F settings and use a flash. Now then, what happens, and this camera here, the later one is an example, is the aperture blades actually inside the camera, which I'll show you those in a minute. What happens is they become lazy and they don't actually fully operate. So on this camera, as I say, once again we've set this camera to A. We'll cover the selenium cell there with an actual lens cap, but you'll notice, there we go, the camera still fires. And again, so that's telling us that the actual auto exposure isn't actually working particularly accurately. It's not the end of the world. What I've got here, this is a aperture blades here out of a camera that I've actually dismantled, and you can sort of see the way they work. If I hold these up to the camera, they're very quite delicate. I get hold of those. There we go, and you can see they're called like scissor blades, and they literally open and close there, rather like a scissor. Now what happens is, when these were fitted at the factory, Olympus actually coated the back of the aperture blades with a very, very fine coating of machine oil, which was fine when the camera was new and the camera was being used. But what happens is that over the years, and especially with many years of inactive use, where these cameras generally sit inside of a drawer or something, the oil becomes very sticky, almost sort of like a toffee or treacle like substance, and these blades actually lock, and once they're actually locked, it doesn't matter how much the camera tries, it can't actually open them up to the correct exposure. And that's what's happened in this slightly more modern camera. The actual shutter blades, they work and you can adjust them on sort of manually, but what's happened is they're not fully opening and closing, and they're actually locked. So this camera actually really requires a service to actually to put that right. Other than that, the only other thing that can fail is the actual selenium cell itself. 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a sticky shutter blade there that's the cause. Now it's not the end, it's not the end of the world. You can have these cameras serviced, or you can buy one that's already been serviced, which is probably your best bet, or you can actually do it yourself if you're willing to take one apart. There's plenty of guides actually on the internet. I believe there's actually one on YouTube which shows you step by step in taking one of these cameras apart. And once you actually get these shutters out of the camera here, it's just a simple case then of basically cleaning it with lighter fuel or petrol, or failing that you probably use methylated spirits, but lighter fuel is probably better. And then really a little bit of tiny bit of graphite powder just between the blades, and then you'll find they work fine once that oil's been removed. I'll show you a camera that I dismantled a few years ago and never actually got round to putting back together. Something I've been meaning to do. So it's not for the faint-hearted, and I'll show you a camera in its actual dismantled state. Here's one I took apart earlier, about 10 years ago actually. Right, this, as I say, this is not for the faint-hearted. This is the sort of level of deconstruction you have to actually get involved with to actually remove the little shutter blades there and clean them. It's quite interesting is that now I've got this one apart, if I can bring this up to the camera, I don't know how much we can actually see, but you can actually see there the actual locking mechanism and the little red flag there popping up into the viewfinder, and actually in there, and I say you can barely see it, is the little swing needle which comes across, which is basically a light meter powered from the selenium cell. And when that comes up, depending where that meter is, that traps the needle and that opens and closes the shutter accordingly. This one in particular, I got this stage, and it actually turned out that the selenium cell had failed. So there wasn't really much I can do with that. So other than just a display model, this one really, I suppose you can go out and source another camera and take it apart and hope that you get one with a good selenium cell. It's basic sort of like, sort of, I say, nut and bolt work really. You do end up with a very small tiny packet of screws, and there's a couple of little tiny ball bearings as well that you need to actually keep an eye on. But as I say, it can be done if that's really what you want to do. Buying one of these cameras today, I mean, I was actually quite surprised, because I started buying these around about sort of 2000, 2001. I went through a stage of deciding to get a few of these cameras, and I was paying, probably back then, anything from sort of I think the maximum I paid was £5, and I believe I bought about 9 or 10 out of that. 6 were good, and 4 needed work. 3 was basically just a quick service to get the blades going, and the 10th one is the one you see there, which the selenium cell has failed. So it's a little hit or miss. I mean, like I say, these cameras do fail. They do require a service. if you're going to buy one of these cameras to actually to use as a camera today, it's probably best to actually buy one that's been already serviced. Quite a few of these are available on the internet. Expect to pay, I would say anything probably from £30 to £60, depending on where you actually buy the camera from. Obviously, some come with a guarantee, and some actually they've actually this sort of like vinyl kind of like wrap around the camera's actually been replaced with leather. On some of the cameras they have rather nice black leather or tan leather. There's even one I've seen with pink and orange leather, which actually looks quite attractive, you know. But you're going to expect to pay £50 plus for one of those cameras. But even so, you know, it's still quite a nice. Even at £50, it's actually quite a nice thing to own. If you want to buy one, just a used camera, eBay's probably your best bet. Today's market, expect £10 to £15. I expect. I mean, the prices seem to be going up all the time at the moment, but £10, £15, possibly £20. But I say you do need to check that the actual aperture blades are functional, which is a little tricky. It's like in this camera, you know, it looks very nice, but I say this one requires a service. It's firing on the A setting with the actual lens covered. So it's always a little bit of a risk, unless you're just going to buy one of these cameras purely for just something to keep, you know, something to display decorational purposes. In which case, you know, even if you've got one that's not really sort of fully functional, you know, they're quite nice on their own. It's nice to get one, I suppose, that's in a box. You get the instructions as well. I think you can actually download these on the internet, so if you don't get the instructions, well, it's no real particular worry. They came standard with a soft leather case, and these sort of like deteriorate quite quickly. All of them are quite kind of gone almost sticky now, which isn't very nice. A little bit rarer was this rather nice hard leather case, and it's always worth paying, I would say, an extra £2 or £3 if you get one that comes up in a nice, you know, hard leather case. Boxed example, I don't see many these days. 10 years ago they were going for 30 quid. Today, well, you know, you might be expecting to pay maybe sort of 50, possibly £60 for a boxed example. But if you're seriously into collecting one of these Olympus Trips, that might be your best bet. I'd say other than that, you know, I think they're probably one of the best cameras, certainly the best instant cameras that came out of the 70s. And you know, I just love them. I just love the way they feel, the way they sort of handle. And you know, one day hopefully they'll produce a digital actual insertable converter where we can actually sort of, you know, put those in. And I'd love to actually get out and start using these cameras again with, you know, without the expense of film and processing. So there we go, the Olympus Trip 35, one of the best-selling cameras of the 70s, 80s, and probably one of the best sort of compact cameras that's probably ever been produced. There we go.